Good morning and welcome to Two New Normals. First of all, the obvious one, the hybrid panel situation we've got going on here. And the second one, a world in which cybercrime is not just something businesses have to be a bit worried about and keep at the back of their mind, but potentially a mortal threat to businesses of all sizes. To talk to us about that today and to tell us a lot more and give us lots of expert insight, we have a fantastic panel. Joining us from around the world, I'm not quite sure where they are, but hopefully we'll see them in a moment. We have Louisa Williams, Legal Director at TLT and a Data Protection Specialist. Nadia Kadim, a GDPR lawyer and CEO of cyber security startup NAC Cyber. And David Abwilhill, a lecturer of Quantitative Criminology at the Department of Criminology of the University of Manchester. Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for the invitation to be here. It's, of course, the first face-to-face event of 2021, which feels good. I also live, around the corner, so it was very convenient for me to be here today.
Excellent. Well, fantastic. Well, let's first of all go to, you first of all, David, I think, and let's find out what is the current state of cybercrime then. I mentioned it feels like it's a mortal threat to businesses these days. So tell us what's the situation with cybercrime and which businesses are most vulnerable?
Yeah, that's an important question and also a difficult to answer one. So we have been recording data about cybercrime faced by businesses, but also by individuals since 2006, and we have seen a steep increase in cybercrime. That's, of course, not surprising to anyone. We have seen new types of crimes emerging with new technologies, but also all types of crimes that have adjusted to new technologies. We are talking, for instance, about cyber-enabled fraud that has adjusted, and now online shopping fraud, for instance, is the new normal. This, of course, is not surprising. But as you were saying, some types of organizations may be more vulnerable than others. So I would like to twist your answer slightly, just slightly, and I know that that's not a very good practice, but I will do it anyway. So you ask, which type of organizations are more vulnerable to cybercrime? I will ask, which type of organizations are less vulnerable to cybercrime? And I will start with very top-level answers and then start specifying bit by bit. First of all, companies that do not have digital services are less vulnerable to cybercrime. That's, of course, very evident. But also organizations, and we have seen this in different types of data we have recorded over the years, those organizations that become less visible online, those that have less website content, that are less present in social media, that do not provide employees with business emails, for instance, are also less likely to suffer cybersecurity incidents. That's somehow evident, but maybe less evident than the first answer. And third, we also see that those organizations that save more data electronically, more important data, valuable data electronically, are also more likely to suffer cybersecurity incidents. So having these three principles, being present online, having digital services, and having data saved online, we can start thinking which of those can influence organizations in one way or another. In other words, more digital services, more data, and more visibility online can contribute to more cybersecurity incidents faced. There were also, of course, we have also seen many other types of cybersecurity strategies that can be applied by businesses to reduce the likelihood of cybersecurity incidents, such as providing cybersecurity training, but we can talk about those later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit. Louisa, if we come to you next. From a kind of data protection point of view, asking that kind of broad top-level question again about where we are with cybercrime in 2021, what would your response to that be?
Hi everyone. I suppose what we've been seeing, and this ties in with what you were just talking about, is that obviously like the pandemic meant that businesses had to move to a remote working model at short notice. And so I guess what that has meant is that smaller businesses or SMEs or businesses that previously were perhaps less data driven are now suddenly carrying a lot more data than they were before. And so those businesses pre the pandemic may not have previously needed to invest or focus in cybersecurity as much as they may now need to. And I suppose what that has meant that for the first time, these smaller organizations, these SMEs that haven't invested in the cybersecurity are sort of becoming an attractive target to cyber criminals, more so than those large organizations before that have invested in their cybersecurity, albeit obviously not always that successfully. But I think what we're seeing certainly with clients is that those cyber attackers are anticipating that smaller organizations are more vulnerable for this reason, and then they're obviously like easier for them to target and sort of more vulnerable target for that reason. And I guess what that means from a data protection perspective is that it becomes really important to kind of look at the as well as the technical kind of security measures, also the organizational security measures, so the staff training, because I think what the last year has perhaps seen is that as organizations have moved to these remote working models for completely understandable reasons, things like staff training for recognizing cyber attacks and that kind of thing has sort of perhaps either not transitioned as seamlessly to the remote working model because perhaps they'd always provided staff training in person, or because businesses have been having to take tough decisions about their budgets because of the effects of the pandemic. Perhaps training has sort of fallen down the list of priorities for that reason. And so I guess, I think we all know that the people are often the risk, right? So if people aren't able necessarily to recognize these attacks, which have become, we all know, more and more sophisticated, and they're using their own devices perhaps to access the business system, or they're checking their own personal emails using their business device, then they become a sort of backdoor in, and yeah, obviously create that vulnerability.
Okay, and Nadia, first of all, one of the victims of hybrid panels is the inability for the moderator to check things like pronunciations before the start of a panel, and that's something I always do. And I think I introduced your business as NAC Cyber, but it's NAQ, isn't it? So
no, you were correct.
Was that right? It's NAC. Right, okay, because it says NAQ on my screen here, and it said NAC in my original notes, so there we go. We would have had this discussion backstage otherwise, but never mind. So moving on a little bit from that, Nadia, if we look at the effect that the pandemic has had on rates of cybercrime and why, particularly ransomware, it seems to be everywhere in the news right now. What's that all about?
So firstly, if you talk about the effect of the pandemic in general, we've seen an increase in cybercrime. Criminals have exploited the pandemic to exploit and attack vulnerable people, individuals, but also the businesses, often small businesses, that maybe have less cybersecurity measures, and the less measures you have, the more vulnerable you become. And it kind of became an ideal strategy for these cyber criminals to seek to wreak havoc. And people are working from home, which, like Louisa has mentioned and what's already been discussed, people use their personal devices. They are more likely to engage in personal activity on business devices and connect to insecure networks. So it just makes it a lot easier for criminals to kind of exploit those vulnerabilities and those weak links, if you will. And what we've seen, there's not really one number that I can mention that shows the increase in cybercrime. Different reports mention different numbers. Some reports have mentioned a 400% increase, other 220, others 600%. But what we do know is there has been a massive increase in cybercrime. And indeed, like you said, over the past few months especially, it seems like ransomware has been in the news almost every day. And why is it so common? Well, it's just a very good business model, really. Hiscox research has shown that 58 or 57% of companies hit with ransomware actually pay up. They pay the ransom. So that just means that sets a precedent really for these criminals. They say, well, people pay, so let's continue doing this. Let's continue making this more sophisticated. They come in through phishing emails mostly, where people click on malicious links or download malicious software. And that has really been the main cause of ransomware. And the pandemic has been a catalyst in that, because imagine you're working from home on either your personal device or connecting to an insecure Wi-Fi network. You can't see people. You're not able to check if a request actually comes from the supposed sender. So it's just a lot easier to kind of fall victim to these kind of schemes. Plus, COVID has been used. I think that we've all received those texts and those emails. COVID has been kind of a very good way for criminals to send out these phishing emails and texts saying that they're from the NHS or from the government or your COVID test. And whenever there's kind of a crisis in society, you'll see that criminals exploit these. So I think that's why ransomware is so common at the moment.
Yeah. Ransomware, for anyone who doesn't know what it is where they lock up all your data and then make you pay money to get it back. And it's a horrible nightmare situation, isn't it, David? What's your observation on the spread of ransomware?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the pandemic, just like everyone else in this field, we asked for data about the increase in reports of cybercrime to action fraud, which is the UK Cybercrime Reporting Centre. We saw an increase in many types of cybercrimes faced by individuals, but we did not see an increase in cybercrimes faced by organizations. And then we started wondering what may be happening here, like how come companies are not suffering more attacks when everyone is expecting that to happen, right? And we had several hypotheses that we still need to test and evaluate. The first of them is that cybercrime is not reported. Right? We know that only 8% of cybercrimes are ever reported to action fraud. So it may be that data we have from action fraud has measurement error. It's not accurate. It may also be that many businesses are now letting individual people deal with cybersecurity themselves. And then where employees are suffering attacks, they are reporting them to the police as individuals instead of organizations. That may be explaining why a cybercrime faced by individuals reported to the police has increased, while cybercrime faced by organization has not. In any case, I think cybercrime reporting is an important issue, and I think that's related with the next question, right?
Yeah, well, Louisa, I wanted to just move on from that a little bit and maybe look at, towards the end of this session, we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of practical what you can do as a business to avoid some of these risks and this cybercrime nightmare we seem to be facing. But Louisa, first of all, could you maybe paint a picture of the real risks that businesses face from cybercrime in 2021?
Yeah, no problem. I suppose, I guess, because obviously I come at this with a data protection lens, and I'm a data protection lawyer, one of the nerdy few, but I really enjoy looking at things in that way. But and I suppose the risks when you're thinking about things from a data protection perspective is pretty much comes down to personal data breaches. This is what we're worried about. The loss of data or cyber attackers accessing our personal data or the personal data of our customers, the personal data that we hold as a controller, or even where we're acting as a processor. Because what we're seeing more and more is that those supply chains are being attacked. Because in the same way that I was sort of describing with employees, members of staff, I think what attackers have identified is that often, particularly with the example of, for example, cloud-based solutions, there are so many different links in the chain that, and some of those links are much smaller businesses that, as I was sort of saying earlier, have perhaps traditionally invested less in their cybersecurity. And I think what what attackers seem to have identified is that if they go at perhaps the more vulnerable links in the chain, in the supply chain, they are able then to get to the sort of supplier's customer business, which may, for the attacker, be a more kind of valuable target, for example. And so I think what we always think of in terms of worrying about cyber breaches and personal data breaches, and I know you want to come on to this more towards the end of the session in terms of practical steps, but it is thinking about it in terms of how you can sort of make yourself as robust as possible to anticipate those kind of breaches, and if they do happen, react to them effectively and efficiently, so that if you do have to go to the Information Commissioner or a different regulator, you are able to present the best picture that you can, because I think, regulators recognize that this is a reality. Cyber attacks are unfortunately a reality, and people are going to be vulnerable to them. They are going to happen, but it's about how you've tried to mitigate them, and the story you can present to the regulator that is the important thing, really.
Yeah, Nadia, you were nodding your head there. That ring true with you?
Definitely. As a fellow data protection lawyer, yeah, that's completely true. And what we do is a combination of cybersecurity and legal GDPR compliance, because you just can't unlink the two. If you want to be compliant with data protection laws, you not only have to have a set of legal documents, which we often see as kind of what lawyers do, isn't it? But you also have to have a set of measures, organizational and technical measures. And only then, if you have those three areas, you will be compliant. And it's often easy to kind of think, well, they're not going to attack me because I'm only small, or I'm not of interest, or no one's going to find out if I'm GDPR compliant, which is something that I hear sometimes. But indeed, especially for businesses that have a set of online solutions that they use, it might even be more important to take good cybersecurity measures because there's a larger online presence. And indeed, you are part of a supply chain, and supply chain attacks are one of the most common ways that criminals get into larger companies that have a larger financial benefit for them to attack them, but they get in through these smaller businesses. And that's why it's so extremely important to take, as a small business, and even or especially if you use online cloud solutions, to take those measures. Yeah.
Yeah. So David, you did touch earlier on businesses not reporting cybercrime. So why wouldn't you report cybercrime if you were a business?
That's a very interesting question. That's exactly what we're doing at the moment, trying to understand when businesses report cybercrime and when they do not. I would say that companies do report cybercrime, but they do not report it to public authorities. So we have seen that around 30% of cybersecurity incidents are reported to someone outside the organization, but only 8% are reported to public authorities. So we have different working hypotheses that we are trying to understand what this may be happening. First of all, it may be that companies don't perceive that the public authority is prepared to deal and respond to cybercrime. That may be happening, and we don't have the data to prove that yet, but that's a plausible explanation. However, it's also likely that many companies are concerned about reputational damage related with having suffered cybercrime. They may be concerned that sharing this type of information with the public authorities may involve having a public report online saying this organization has suffered this type of incidents, and that may affect their revenues in the future. However, there's a third potential explanation, which is, to me, the most interesting one, which is related with one finding we have observed recently. So that organizations that have outsourced cybersecurity services, organizations that hire another organization to manage cybersecurity, tend to report cyber crimes to other private companies. while those organizations that have in-house cybersecurity teams, that they hire people to manage cybersecurity, they tend to report to public authorities. So it's possible that cybersecurity services, cybersecurity companies have a private interest in keeping information about cybercrime and cybersecurity in the private sphere, not sharing intelligence and data with public services. We're not saying that's negative, that may be a reality, but in any case, I think it's very important that public and private organizations share information, share data, and establish partnerships to develop policies that adjust to real cybercrime and cybersecurity issues. Recently, the Parliament has been having conversations about the Computer Misuse Act. So we have submitted a response to this consultation saying, listen, if you only use data about cybercrimes reported to public authorities, you will be basing your laws in 8% or even less of crimes. So it's super important that private organizations also share data with the police and with Action Fraud.
I do wonder if it's partly the fact that if someone holds you at gunpoint and robs you, then that feels like a crime, and that feels like I must report that to police. If someone steals money from you online, you're probably just more, you feel, oh, that was my own stupid fault. How did I let that happen? And it feels less like a crime and more like your own stupid fault, kind of. You know, I can imagine feeling like that myself if that happened to me. Yeah, so there's a lot of that there maybe, yeah. Yeah, okay, well, we're nearly at the end, so I think it's worth rounding off with some practical things people can do to minimize the risk of cybercrime. So, Nadia, first of all, from a security point of view, what should businesses be thinking about?
Well, as I said, you can't really unlink GDPR compliance with cybersecurity, but I'll leave the GDPR bits as much as I can to Louisa. Cybersecurity is very broad, so you need to have a set of technical measures as well as organizational measures. And it's been mentioned quite a few times in this panel alone, but training is key. Train your staff. You would be surprised to learn how much of cybercrime is actually caused by human behavior, by clicking on the wrong links, by insecure working practices, by reusing passwords, connecting to an insecure Wi-Fi network. All of that kind of thing can be avoided if you train your staff and have them abide by your company's information security policy. So you need to have these policies in place, but again, I'll leave that to Louisa more. So in the GDPR itself, it talks about encryption, anonymization of data, but actually the technical measures that a business needs to take very much depends on the type of business, the type of data they hold, the type of customers they have, how much of it, etc. So it's really important to carry out a risk assessment and to check what data you hold as a company, from whom, so your employees, your customers, and realize that this not only has an impact on your reputation, but can actually be a positive. It can be actually an investment into your reputation. So there's 5 very practical things that every business needs to do, or actually 6, I'll make it 6. So you're ready to write it down. Have a firewall on your network and turn it on your computer if it's possible. Back up your data. Have an admin account that allows you to not automatically download something if you do click on a suspicious link, or if one of your employees does. But you'll have to enter an admin account name and password before something gets downloaded. Have anti-malware installed, and take care of your passwords. Now, was that 5 or 6? I'm not sure. I didn't count. I might have missed one. But
people are taking notes in the room, so
oh, very good.
I've
actually written a blog a few weeks ago on the cybersecurity measures that small businesses need to take, and it's as actionable as this, as I'm trying to explain to you now. So head on over to our website and read about it, and download it if you want to keep it, and just follow those steps.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And Louisa, you've got about 1 minute to tell us, complicated topic, but just some steps people can take in terms of data protection.
Okay, well, I'm a lawyer. There's no way I'll stick to 1 minute, but I'll give it a go. I think it's about understanding your roles and responsibilities if there is a breach. So, and mapping them in advance. So I think this comes back to the point about people not reporting. I think, firstly, I expect lots of businesses are terrified of the fines under the GDPR, but I think sometimes people don't know who to report to, don't know when they need to report to the regulator, or understanding how the risk analysis works for that, or if it's a cross-border breach, which regulators you need to report to and involve. And it can be really complicated. And what we've seen clients do is run little kind of simulation breaches, like war games. You can document everything because that's key with GDPR, but just work out who's going to be responsible for what and at what stage, and just practice it. It's actually quite simple to do. Do the self-training, but also document that you've done it. It's one of the questions in the ICO's breach report, if you ever report, is when did the member of staff involved have training, and when was the last time they were trained? And it's very embarrassing to have to answer no to that question, or yes, it was 10 years ago. Also with the supply chains that we discussed, that is a huge risk to businesses. So just do your due diligence and document your due diligence when you've done it, because if there is a breach, the ICO will ask to see that documentation. And again, it's embarrassing if you have nothing that you can provide, or you're scrabbling together to just piece together email chains instead of having a sort of document that you've pulled together. So yeah, I guess those are the key points in a minute.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. We're going to have to wrap it up there, but thank you very much to Louisa Williams, Dr. David Bilhill, and Nadia Kadim. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.